Hey everybody, my name's John Jahnke. I'm CEO of Tackle. I'm excited to be joined by Matt Yanchyshyn from AWS, who owns the overall Amazon partner organization, engineering and product team. Matt has been instrumental in helping drive the rapid evolution of AWS for ISVs and partners alike. So we're going to talk today about our State of Cloud go-to-market research and just some of Matt's experience with ISVs, partners, and buyers, and his reaction to our research that we released a couple weeks back. Looking forward to the session. All right, Matt, great to see you. How you been?
I've been well. How are you?
I've been great. Excited to have you here. So could you take a minute and just introduce yourself to the audience, who you are, what you do for AWS?
Sure. Matt Yanchyshyn. I'm the Vice President of AWS Marketplace and Partner Services. So I build a bunch of services, software solutions that help customers do business with AWS partners and help partners do business with AWS. So the big ones are AWS Marketplace and AWS Partner Central.
I mean, you've been at AWS for a long time, 12 years, and maybe I think last year you said you've been to every Reinvent when I saw you there. And what's your favorite thing to do at Reinvent from a business standpoint, and then maybe from a personal standpoint?
I mean, it's changed over the years. Reinvent is definitely like a learning conference, and I like how AWS has stuck to that. I like to joke that it's the worst place to take meetings, and I think that's something we should be proud of. It's a place where people go to learn about new services and tech. And the earlier days of my career was very much about that. Giving early Redshift workshops and really helping customers understand how to use our services effectively. It's really shifted more to customer meetings now for me. I spend a lot of time locked in the EBC and the Executive Briefing Center. That's amazing. I mean, I never have an opportunity. I typically meet between 30 to 60 customers and partners in that 1 week, and spending time, the caliber of people now who attend Reinvent, typically C-level senior decision makers. It's a really good use of my time. And I actually try to bias more on customers than partners. It's really easy in my role to spend all my time with partners. But if you look at my schedule this year, very much intentionally, our top buyers for Marketplace, both prospective and current. For personal, anyone who knows me, including perhaps Adam from Tackle, know that I love music. So I try to always see live music, not just the Reinvent show. Also, a good friend, the late Tony Shea, was good buddies with him. And I used to go actually stay at his place. He lived in kind of a decked out trailer park, and I would stay in a tiny home or a trailer. And that was my escape from Reinvent. See live music, go out in downtown and just kind of get away from it all. And go see some shows.
That's awesome. Well, hopefully we'll see you there again this year. So you guys have been on a tear, releasing tons of new features and capabilities for the partner ecosystem, and some of them are really big, some of them are small. Maybe share some highlights for you, like things that you were really excited about, or maybe even things that you could talk about that might be coming down the pike.
Over the last couple of years, we're just closing out year 2 of a 3-year journey on this thing we call the partner experience transformation. And it was really exciting. Last year, after sort of the first big wave of feature launches, there were a lot of like paper cuts that had built up over the years that made it hard for partners to do business with AWS. And we've been systematically knocking those down. And that goes a long way to explaining kind of the release cadence that you're seeing on the partner side. We really want to make AWS the best place to partner, the best place to co-sell, the best place for partners to build businesses. And to do that, you have to reduce operational burden. I don't want AWS to be a place where you have to hire a whole team just to build a successful business. So we've been focused on automation and a lot of these sort of partner-oriented features. That's been exciting because it's paying off. Like we have huge partners now running massive deal desks with like one person, where it would have taken like 10 or 100 in years past. So that's tangible and satisfying. But, for me personally, the biggest shift, I'd say over the last 18 months, and really a focus of mine since I came into this role a couple of years ago, has been to actually refocus on the buyer, on the customer side. We spent years when we came out, we started as a self-service marketplace, then we pivoted to sort of private offers and more enterprise buying motions. And sure, SaaS private offers are like the biggest part of our business. And we really focused a lot on sellers and partners. How can we help sellers, partners through marketplace become successful? And we kind of took our eye off the ball a little bit on like the customer-facing, buyer-facing, pay-as-you-go, self-service, product-led growth side of the business. So, you've seen it. We were talking about it before the show. The real emphasis on PLG, on product-led growth features, things like SaaS free trials, request a demo, request private offer. We just relaunched all of our website product detail pages, better SEO, better discovery. All these things that ultimately benefit like the buyer, like make it easier to find stuff, easier to try stuff, easier to set stuff up. that's super exciting, and that's why I'm spending so much of my time with customers. And it also dovetails with what partners are getting excited about, because everyone wants a healthy contract-based private offer business for the big deals, but they also want new business. And one of the best ways to get new business, new logos to grow, whether it's down market or otherwise, is through a product-led growth strategy. So I'm really excited about helping partners develop that strategy, realize that strategy with the buyer-facing features we've been launching.
Yeah, such a great tee up for some of the State of Cloud go-to-market research data that we have to talk about today. And the first one really centers around this topic of buyer behavior change. I mean, we've been at this for closing in on 7 years at Tackle, and it's been amazing to see the evolution of buyer behavior. But this year, we saw a 500% increase in buyers over the last 4 years. And just in the last year, a 70% increase in the quantity buyers in the last 12 months. And as you think about that buyer behavior change, and you hit on some of the themes already, like the product-led growth, user discoverable solutions, like what are your expectations around buyer behavior change as it continues?
You might have heard me say this at a couple of conferences, but it's not cliche. It's true. You have a whole generation of not just buyers, but like buyer decision makers, like often C-levels, who grew up in this like immediate access, essentially like app store generation. And a lot of them are now chief procurement officers, DIOs, or even the line of business buyers just buying the software. And in your research that I've read and in discussions we've had, people don't want to talk to humans. I mean, really, if you boil it down, and they want to move faster, but fundamentally, they want to buy stuff, discover stuff quickly, be able to make trusted buying decisions without necessarily having to involve like a whole team. And that's both for sort of speed and efficiency reasons, but also just like buyer behaviors are changing. And what I find super interesting is it's not just startups and not just small companies, even large, like the world's largest companies, like all of Fortune 500 use AWS in some capacity. And like even buyers for those Fortune 500 are increasingly wanting sort of that immediate need. Like they're experimenting with generative AI foundation models like anyone else. And they want to try like 5 of them and associated technologies like different vector databases quickly. And they want to pay as you go when they try them, not like go through lengthy contract negotiations. So even huge enterprises are wanting, like their behaviors are changing. And then also even on the big software side, I think that's also the different buyer behaviors are driving on the software side too. Like if you asked like Salesforce or ServiceNow or even SAP, all of which now list on Marketplace, which you would have laughed me out of the room a few years ago, like they too want to have PLG motions to attract both those existing buyers in the enterprise cohort, but also down market to drive new business in SMB. So again, it sounds cliche, but it's true. We are in this kind of revolution of more immediacy, faster. It really often comes down to speed. And ultimately, like different people with different needs making those buying decisions.
Yeah, I think your point around trust is a really good one, and one that doesn't often get brought up. I think the trusted catalog from AWS and from the clouds more broadly is a big part of that, giving people confidence, because we're in this era of there's so much software and there's so much more software coming out every single day. It's hard to know what to trust. That's exciting. So one of the complementary points to buyer behavior change is deal size evolution. And you touched on everybody wants a healthy private offer business. And I think that's for those who might be newer to the cloud go-to-market world, private offers are really where the acceleration of growth came from. People being able to align their selling motions to AWS Marketplace via this function called private offers. But in the last 4 years, we've actually seen deal size go down by 80%. And I think a lot of this does come to that combination of buyer behavior change and, maybe just a broader buyer community having access to trusted sources from things like AWS Marketplace. When you think about the deal size evolution, and you talked about Salesforce and SAP, we're not only seeing the average deal size go down by 80%, but we're seeing large deals continue to expand, like deals in the hundreds of millions of dollars. So I'd love to hear just like deal size evolution and how you guys think about that continuing to evolve.
We now have multiple partners who've transacted over $2 billion through Marketplace and more than that, who've done $1 billion. Like you don't get to that with $50 deals, right? And so certainly on the large end, listen, the types of solutions that people are buying through marketplaces like AWS Marketplace is changing. Like I was joking before, you would have laughed me out of the room if I said you could buy your CRM, your ITSM, and your ERP from Marketplace, but that's now happening every day, and those aren't cheap. And so, if you're buying Salesforce, ServiceNow, Infor, SAP through the Marketplace, often those are large, complicated deals, and it's happening all the time. So we're seeing those deals happen, but even, successful, to your point, private offer more what we call infrastructure partners from the security space, analytics space, like the Databricks of the world, the Mongos, the Palo Altos, et cetera, Datadogs. They're also just becoming bigger companies. Snowflake, they're closing massive deals with increasingly large enterprises, public sector, governments, et cetera. And again, those buyers are wanting to transact through the marketplace for a variety of reasons. So that's the mix of sort of the rise of horizontal business apps and enterprise applications more generally through the marketplace, coupled with the maturing of these previous startups that are now the norm. It's not just kind of Splunk out there. You have Snowflake, Splunk, Databricks, et cetera, and they're all closing huge deals and they're huge companies in their own right. Those two factors are contributing to that large deal size. On the smaller size, some of those same companies I mentioned, like Mongo, like Databricks, like smaller ones like Archera, Palo Alto Networks, are actually some of the biggest users of product-led growth features and things like pay-as-you-go server products like Amis, et cetera. And those tend to be smaller deals. And what companies like they are doing, whether they're startups, like we were at the Startup Summit, and it blew my mind how many startups are using Marketplace. They're closing smaller deals at scale because they essentially use us as their growth engine, as their deal desk, and they're pushing their book of business to us. So that's fueling on the startup side. But then you have like MongoDB, for example, or Databricks. They use the PLG motion, the small deal sizes, as kind of a growth engine or to fuel a private offer pipeline down the road. So they kind of acquire new business, nurture that business, and eventually get to that business to the point where they can transact it as a private offer. And I think that's the trend we're seeing, which is fueling both the big and the small. And the smartest ISVs out there have a hybrid approach where they're both funneling smaller deals, new deals, experimental deals through their self-service or pay-as-you-go or product-led growth pipeline, and then nurturing them and eventually turning them into large deals in the back end, coupled, of course, with the large enterprise deals. So those are some of the macro trends that are influencing what you're talking about.
We see more ISVs being born today, cloud go-to-market native. So they're thinking about how can they have Marketplace be both sides of that, both rails of that strategy, the product-led rail and the enterprise rail, and then grow within those rails.
Yeah, that's what you got to do these days. Absolutely.
So market growth, we a few years ago predicted this market would be $100 billion by 2026. Canalys came out with complementary research that said 85 billion by 2028. Ours was 100% growth. Theirs was 80% growth. I mean, we're kind of in the same zone. And I think there's no doubt it's going to be big, but maybe less specific to growth for you as you think about like the KPIs that really matter for AWS Marketplace and what, our audience mostly is made up of ISVs and partners. What ISVs and partners can learn from the KPIs you measure. What could you share about that?
We used to be a lot more concerned about number of deals, number of private offers, et cetera. We've actually started to move away from that because of what you were just talking about and how we're seeing clusters of large deals and clusters of small deals, and the aggregate count is suddenly less interesting than it was in the past. What I'm more interested in is how much of the business is renewals versus net new. That's a huge thing. Like, are people just shifting their buying motion to the marketplace and just using it as a place to renew? Or are they actually starting with a marketplace motion in the first place? And that's a really interesting metric that we're paying a lot of attention to. And then how much of that business, whether it's new or renewal, is net new to the partner? Well, I guess not in the case of a renewal, but maybe net new to AWS. And how much new business are we bringing to AWS and how much new business are we bringing to partners? That's really interesting. So I'm looking at that metric. I mentioned speed a couple times, and I keep coming back to this. More and more, that is my most important metric. So how are we actually shrinking the time it takes to find something you need, to procure something you need? Like, if I can shorten the legal negotiation or contract negotiation process or the fulfillment and configuration, so end-to-end sort of time from discovery to making it useful, that includes but is not limited to the actual procurement piece. And that last part is important because something, the research differs. I don't know what your research shows, but the one research I've seen said that sometimes up to 60% of products bought only get used once or never because they're not properly set up, or you buy too many licenses. It's usually the former. They're not set up for success. So helping with that piece too will lead to better retention and better renewals. So speed, how much things are actually getting used after they're bought, net new business, and proportion of net new business relative to renewals. And then, of course, the regular metrics like, how much total contract value is flowing through and the conversion between self-service or pay-as-you-go on PLG to private offer like we were discussing. Those are some of the top ones that jump to mind. But if I had to pick one, it's probably speed. Customers are happier if it goes quickly, it works well. Partners are happier because their deal velocity goes up. Everyone's happier. So
And I think like the one we think a lot about is efficiency, like go-to-market efficiency. We're in this era where it's no longer growth at all costs for software companies. You
Yeah,
have to build your go-to-market efficiently. And I think speed is a key under tenet of efficiency, because if you can decrease time to value for your buyers, help them get access to what they need, get it quickly, get using it, it all comes back to speed.
and actually, yeah, just you made me think. It's really hard to measure operational efficiency, and it's famously hard to measure things like you said feature launch velocity earlier, like how fast are we shipping software. But one thing I can measure is like the number of support people we have, how many tickets are coming through. And one of the downsides of having everything go faster, both for the sellers and for me, is when everything is automated, everything is APIs, like the problems can happen at scale too. And suddenly you get massive ticket volume, or sellers might get a ton of private offers where they didn't happen before, and suddenly they need to staff like a desk if they're not prepared with automation, and that ends up costing money, hitting margin. So I'm also looking really closely at how can we measure operational efficiency. And so it's not directly tied to speed. In fact, sometimes it's made worse by speed because deal volume can actually have a downside effect on the partners who aren't prepared. So that's why my portfolio is not just the marketplace, but also Partner Central and all of the tools for partners, because it's super important that we help partners in partnership with Tackle, for example, and a mix of our tooling and third-party tooling be efficient so they can handle this new volume well.
I mean, we kind of gloss over some of the macro level market stats, but if we say there's $1 trillion of B2B software being sold, I mean, we're still in the single digit adoption curve point for marketplaces. And it's growing fast. Like you could say, if 100% is the right number, it's growing 3 times or 4 times faster than the macro level cloud budget. But the macro level cloud numbers are so massive, it's easy to grow 3 or 4 times faster at a smaller number. But I do think we're in the earliest days of this journey.
You said before, yeah, I've been here or at AWS for 12 years, and it's uncanny how similar this conversation is to the conversation maybe 10 years ago where everyone was like, oh, I'm not going to run that on the cloud. It's mission critical. And now fast forward to today in the marketplace, and it's, I'll never buy that through the marketplace. Or, once I hit my spend commit limit, I'll run everything direct. And that's increasingly not becoming true. It's the new normal way of doing things, just like cloud was a decade ago.
Yeah, I was doing some research for State of Cloud Go-to-Market, and I was trying to go back and time series out where was AWS at certain points in time. And I think that the one stat I found was 2010, $500 million business. And you just try to read the earnings report and you look at just the magnitude of the business from then to now. It's really quite astounding.
Totally. I feel lucky to have been part of it. It's awesome.
I'm actually going to switch order a little bit and go to co-sell, because I think some of the comments you made really align with co-sell. And I was a little surprised with some of these stats when we got our research back this year, but 70% of ISVs said co-selling impacted less than 30% of their pipeline. 57% disagreed or completely disagreed that, the clouds offered valuable leads or referrals. And the general sentiment from people from the research was everybody wants more leads, but this is a really complicated topic because, AWS has hundreds of native services, has thousands of third-party products, and are like lead gen and co-sell even the same thing? I think a lot of people bundle those two things together when in reality, they might be two separate things. And we've seen stats just consistently reinforce when people are actively engaged in co-selling, when they're investing, because you have to invest, it's not something that just magically happens. They see 40% larger deal sizes, deals closing 20% faster, which are massive benefits. But I'd be curious, as you think about co-sell, some of the stats that we shared, and even some of the sentiment you see when you meet with partners. How do you see co-sell today, and how do you think co-sell evolves in the future?
The first is, there's definitely something I call the field of dreams syndrome, where people think they can just put up a marketplace listing with minimal investment, without any of the differentiated features, and the leads will flow, and that our reps will just pick it up and run with it, and that there'll be organic sort of discovery and lead gen coming through both sort of self-service, sort of through our web properties and from our field. And that's just not true. Like you said, we have a huge portfolio, not just of services, of partners, but also like the amount, relatively speaking, of organic traffic that's just coming to the marketplace today for net new discovery is not that high. What marketplace is an excellent place to pour gas on for go-to-market and demand gen efforts that you, the partner, do. So it's an amazing place. Like it increases conversion, for example. It's a great place to leverage things like free trials, to leverage things like request a demo, request a private offer. Like we're giving you a free deal qualification desk. If you're a startup, like that helps because you don't need to hire people to do a deal desk. We'll do it for you so you can hire more reps to go sell. So you need to step it up a notch and acknowledge you need to do either partner with someone or do it yourself, some of your own demand gen and go to market, and then use the marketplace as a way to amplify and accelerate that. And then similarly for our field, yeah, like our field is big, but I mean, it's not as big as the world's largest disties. So as a partner, you have to ask yourself, who am I going to target? What market segments, what industries, et cetera? Who are the best channel partners in addition to AWS who can help me sort of sell into those markets? And have the most successful partners have a nuanced and multifaceted approach. And they leverage, maybe for the large deals that are customers who are existing in the cloud in AWS, where there's an incentivized field operation in AWS to help you co-sell for that segment. But then for the other segment, maybe for more downstream SMB, maybe they leverage a distribution partner or a channel partner. And then for more long tail, like I said earlier, maybe they do a mix of their own demand gen and co-sell on top of marketplace listings with value-added features like free trials. That may sound complicated, but selling is complicated, especially if you're targeting multiple geos, multiple segments, multiple industries, and it needs to be a nuanced approach. So partners who take that nuanced approach grow the fastest. And you see, I mentioned like our chair earlier or Drada and all these ones at the Startup Summit, like they've built sort of outsized co-sell muscle by leveraging a bit of all three, picking the right channel partners, picking select deals to co-sell with AWS, not expecting to get like this wave of thousands of AOs from Amazon, but the right ones that are lucrative. And then, going through the channel and then doing some of the direct stuff for long tail. And those guys are growing the fastest. So co-sell must be nuanced and must be directly linked to who you're targeting, what your product fit is, where you're targeting. And we can help you with that and help you structure that. So a lot of people, again, think that you can just throw a listing up there and the rest happens. But there is value. I mean, just ask Salesforce. It's growing faster than either of us could have ever dreamed. It's amazing where the customer portfolio overlaps and where we can co-sell together. We're more effective together. So of course you should do that in addition to those other things.
Yeah, I think Kevin from Drada is this line, you get out what you put in. And I totally agree. And I think like nuance is such a better way because people will often say, this sounds so complicated. Why is it so complicated? I like your line. Selling is complicated and the solution is nuance, and those who figure out how to put the right package together across marketplace, channel, disty can meet those nuances effectively.
Yeah, and that's my vision is I like the word that Andy Jassy uses, primitives. I want to give you the right set of primitives that you can build a co-sell model or rather a selling model that maps to the product that you're selling and where you're going to market. And so we're not going to give you the whole package. That's for you to put together with the primitives that we provide you, and they're powerful primitives.
You touched on Salesforce, and I think we'll come back to business applications as a category. So this is one I remember thinking back when we were getting started at Tackle, like when Salesforce embraced AWS Marketplace, that's when this was really real. And last year they launched a Reinvent, which was a journey in and of itself. But this year, the number one category of ISVs who responded to our survey were business applications for the first time ever. And it's 32%, which is a pretty material quantity of providers, because when most people think about AWS Marketplace, they think about the classic cloud-aligned infrastructure categories. A lot of the companies you name today, security, DevOps, data infrastructure, analytics, AI, very aligned to the builder community. But now you start to think about these companies like Salesforce, ServiceNow, and SAP, and ERP products. Like it's a very different world. And probably the most common objection I hear from biz apps ISVs are, do my buyers really show up in AWS Marketplace? And so maybe would love just your reaction on business applications as a category, how you respond to business application providers when they maybe pose objections to you, and just what you see happening in the biz app space.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I concur with your research. It is very fast growing and an exciting, I was on stage with Lenore Lang from Salesforce in the keynote of Reinvent last year. And yeah, we were pumped. And I think at that time, neither Lenore nor I expected it to grow as fast as it has grown. And, it's not just Salesforce, right? At the time, it was ServiceNow as well. That it was right around that time. Adobe had come on board, Infor had come on board, like a whole wave of business applications. SAP now with Signavio Suite is now in the marketplace. So, part of it is like, once one takes that first step and realizes success, so there's going to be a bit of FOMO and others will come on. So, there is something to that. Large, successful business applications, once they see success in some of their peers, they're going to want to emulate it, of course. It's business. So that's part of it. There's a network effect at play. But more importantly, is sort of going back to what we were talking about earlier. Yeah, that question, do my buyers show up to Marketplace? And the answer is maybe, maybe not. But Marketplace makes it easier to sell to those buyers. It's kind of the other way around. And so increasingly, Marketplace is becoming one of the new normals for procurement. It's still a little bit outside of sort of traditional enterprise procurement processes, and that's a major focus of my roadmap in 2025. But for the most part now, it's just an integrated part. It's how you procure part of your portfolio. It's how you're already buying Snowflake, you're already buying Databricks, you're already buying increasingly large, starting with infrastructure, traditional cloud partners, but increasing portion of your software portfolio in the cloud. And hey, it makes it easier because it shows up in the AWS bill. Maybe you have a commitment with AWS and it helps you achieve that commitment. There's layer upon layer get added, and it makes it easier for you to sell into that enterprise. These deals are large and complex when it comes to horizontal business applications. And every time you can chip away at making that deal easier, making that renewal easier, the better. And so Marketplace is one of those things that's chipping away. It doesn't matter whether your buyers show up or not. It's the fact that maybe your legal teams find it easier because the product they're buying is using the standard contract for Marketplace and they don't need to redline as much. There's all these reasons for the different people involved in the lengthy procurement cycle. Maybe the security and trust people are like, oh, they did a foundational technical review, or it's an OMI, and so they're doing malware scanning. I don't need to do as many checks. That part gets faster. It's life by 1,000 cuts, like these layered value points that add up. The business applications with their long procurement cycles, with their long sales cycles, stand to benefit most from. Network effect, reducing procurement friction and ultimately sort of lowering the time that it takes to get these large deals through. That's interesting. So why wouldn't you do it? And that's where we're at. The other thing too is increasingly these business applications are running on AWS. Salesforce Hyperforce runs on AWS. ServiceNow, has now announced that some of their products are running on AWS. And the data, which is so important in this age of generative AI and just analytics in general, is also often on AWS. It is easier and often less expensive to have more of your application portfolio, especially when there's a large data component running in the cloud, right? So that's a driving factor as well as the infrastructure realities and the success of AWS that is helping to spin the flywheel of AWS Marketplace adoption. The last thing I'll add to is that with horizontal business applications, a big trend recently has been how do we sustain growth in the market? And if you think of Salesforce, it's not just CRM anymore. They have a large portfolio that caters to a mix of large enterprise buyers all the way down to kind of, small SMB with some of their product portfolio. So how are they reaching those customers? They have a direct sales motion. They don't have a mechanism to reach sort of small startups to buy Slack licenses. Maybe it's easier to reach them via Marketplace. Even SAP, they have SAP Rise, but they also have SAP Grow, for SMB. So, hey, maybe we're an effective channel in a less of a high touch way to deliver and sell to these other segments that they're now targeting for new growth. So all sorts of reasons, but those two, procurement friction reduction and helping them to reach new markets, expand their business are two that jump to mind.
Yeah, we have some predictions. I don't know if we'll get to them today, but about SMB and international. You released a lot of capabilities around international that were fun to be a day zero launch partner for. But I think we're in the earliest days of cloud go-to-market, but international and SMB are both massive opportunities for the future. So ownership of cloud go-to-market, and I think this links to the business application conversation. This is the first year we saw a meaningful decline in who said they own cloud go-to-market. So historically, it was always the head of whoever cared about the partnership with AWS. So traditionally, the head of channel, alliances, VP of channel, channel chief. And last year, 59% of those people said they owned cloud go-to-market. This year, it actually went down to 31%. And we see this as a signal that cloud go-to-market is a much more cross-functional, executive aligned initiative inside of these companies. And you even said it, the level of roles showing up at Reinvent, it's no longer just the product owner or the developer or the engineer. Now it's a business owner, it's the CEO, it's the CRO, it's the chief product officer. And I'd just be curious on this topic of ownership. Does this mirror what you're seeing as you're engaging with ISVs? And I think for me, the business app category, just the names you think about for Salesforce, Salesforce talked about this on their earnings call. These are really strategic initiatives for these companies. So how are you seeing cloud go-to-market ownership evolve?
Well, I guess there's the seller, so the partner side and the buyer side. And there's actually some crossover there in terms of what role I'm talking to. Increasingly, I'm talking to the CFO and the CRO. You alluded to this, but it is true. For the CRO, certainly the partners, because they're looking for those new business opportunities that I was talking about earlier. One thing that's interesting about Marketplace is it rose along with the rise of SaaS more generally, software as a service. And you have a lot of CFOs that they look across their sort of IT portfolio. They see license sprawl, they see lack of visibility, and they see Marketplace as one important tool that they can use from a procurement and governance perspective to better govern what is bought and how it's getting used and whether it's set up for successful sort of value extraction, if it's configured to work. So, CFOs are seeing incredibly high spend across all these licenses and waste. And they think that, hey, we can maybe consolidate some of the spending, get better visibility of the spending, better govern the spending through Marketplace. That's a totally different question. And then that same person says, hey, I just negotiated this huge deal with AWS, and I understand that a portion of it I can fill with my Marketplace purchases. So that same conversation that gets interesting, and again, how can I better negotiate discounts by including more Marketplace spend in my overall negotiations with AWS? So these are C-level CFO conversations. That is not the alliance manager. That is often not even the chief procurement officer, because they're more about kind of the operations and the process. It's as a company, how can we reduce operational costs, reduce costs in general, and simplify, especially these last few years with the top-down cost pressures. Yeah, CRO on the partner side growing a business and saving money, often at odds. On the buyer side, the CFO, that's a huge change. And I mentioned chief procurement officer. I don't mean to dismiss them. I still don't think they're our primary target. Marketplace still targets the IT buyer. I was at the DPW conference, which was great in Amsterdam a few weeks ago, but those people there, they were still kind of like, okay, what's Marketplace? But increasingly, now that some of our integration partners are surfacing Marketplace in their ITSM and ServiceNow or through Ariba or through Coupa, it's starting to surface on literally the dashboards that they stare at all day, the procurement teams. And so I think, one of these days we will have kind of the year of the CRO with Marketplace. And I've actually taken a personal goal, just like I was on stage with Salesforce last year announcing them, and that was the big surprise. I've taken a goal. I don't know if I can get there. I'm going to try to stand on stage at Reinvent next year with the chief procurement officer from a major German auto manufacturer. And if you know procurement, that's like the high watermark. And not then say that procurement is easier in the cloud thanks to Marketplace. So wish me luck, but that's kind of one where I get. But it's indicative of this shift, to your point, in people who are caring about Marketplace.
Yeah, I love that goal. Would love to figure out how to try to help you cross that.
Let's do it together. Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be fun. So kind of rounding out the main research, channel's been an area of huge investment for AWS over the last 4 years, pioneering with CPPO and just seeing that continue to evolve. And that came out clear in the research. 60% of respondents said in the last 12 months, transactions included channel partners. 87% expect transactions to include channel partners this year. And 50% of ISVs said channel is critical to their cloud go-to-market strategy. So where are we at in the evolution of channel with AWS, and what's next? Is it just continuing to grow along the massive growth in the business? I think you guys really kicked this off, and how do you see it evolving?
In some ways, it mirrors the relationship that we had with some of our ISV infrastructure partners a long time ago, like 10 years ago when I started with AWS. You remember when Redshift came out and Snowflake and Redshift were kind of figuring out their dance, and turns out both can be successful. And listen, Snowflake and Databricks are killing it on AWS, and we love them as partners. We're sort of in halfway there in a similar way with channel partners. Rewind a few years, when CPPO came out, a lot of people were said, channel partners aware of you? Are you competing with them? Are you the channel as Marketplace? What's the deal? And it turns out that, channel partners have trusted relationships with customers that we simply do not have, and they have scale, but whether it's internationally or just with field sellers that often we don't have or just aren't our area of expertise, especially once you get into industry verticals. It's a better together story. We can't be successful without them. And in the age of cloud, they can't be successful without us. So let's make it work. And that's where CPPO came from. More recently with distribution partners and our designated seller of record or DSOR, the strong relationships we have with Ingram Micros, the Carasofts, the TD Synexes of the world. I think from the outside, this would all seem strange. But from where I'm sitting, it's one of the fastest growing parts of my business. It's a way to help customers, especially in areas like state and local government or public sector in general, who are often required to work with channel partners or just prefer. So great, let's work with them together. And they can also do a lot of things that I can't. In the same way that Tackle has been so helpful in the tooling that you've built to sort of facilitate the onboarding process and co-sell setup and introduce all this automation for customers. A lot of these channel partners provide a lot of the same capabilities, whether it's from like a financing or invoice capability or co-sell reach or all these things that they bring to the table that are complementary, that like help our joint customers and joint partners. So like, let's work together. And so anyone who's worked in this business will know that the channel's a thing. And increasingly ISVs, it's expensive to invest in go-to-market. It's expensive to invest in sales, especially once you talk about moving outside of the US. If you're a US-based ISV, you need the channel for that. If you want to grow as fast as your investors are requiring you to grow, you need that. You can't have it both ways. You want channel, you want marketplace. So let's bring them together. So it's core to my strategy. You really see it reflected in my roadmap. We're only just getting started. Like a huge percentage of the headcount in my team is dedicated toward channel-based features.
I think channel here to stay. Distribution, we have a prediction around distribution, really saying they're still trying to figure it out. We've seen massive lean in from distribution, but
Yeah.
I think it's early days there. Like, how does it all work out? Ingram Micro going public. I read Ingram Micro's S1, and when you decompose their S1, you'll look at the business. How does Marketplace 5 years from now fit into that business? I think a lot of stories to come in the distribution world.
Yeah.
So a couple of predictions, and then we'll wrap things up. Really appreciate the time. We, for years, have been calling how fast this market will grow. Canalys calls it. I talked about those numbers. We said 100 billion. They said 85 billion. We said 100% growth. They said 80% growth. I don't think anyone can truly predict it without you all actually talking about the real results. But AWS is such a complicated business. CrowdStrike talked about their marketplace business in 2020 in their earnings call. Salesforce earlier this year talked about their AWS Marketplace business on their earnings call. I mean, do you think you'll ever publish the results of the marketplace and co-sell business in Amazon's earnings, or is that a pipe dream prediction for me to make?
You'll have to ask our CFO. It seems like a great goal to set. AWS has been pretty successful, and you see them now, broken out in the earnings. So, hey, sure, if they want to do that, if that's good for our customers and good for business, by all means. Listen, I mean, the rate that we're growing, it wouldn't surprise me. It's not just marketplace. I think anyone who's worked, certainly from a partnership perspective, I know Tackle's seen this with AWS for a while, has noticed how, partner is now a central part of the core sales motion. It's not just a marketplace thing. It's not just a partner team thing. Like the core sales, it's not just kind of co-sell on the edge. It's like partners, both consulting partners, ISV, and other types of partners are central to how we do like a huge chunk of our business. And marketplace is our default way to go to market for partners at AWS. So it only makes sense that as AWS increasingly leans into partners and marketplace is increasingly the way that we go to market with them, that AWS's success is partner and is marketplace's success. So I hope it's in those earnings. Let's watch that space.
And maybe the last prediction, and you talked about primitives and enabling primitives, and we made a prediction around the evolution of storefront, because I think, similar, a company I love is Shopify, and you think about how Shopify evolved in the B2C world, and effectively they enabled any entrepreneur to create a storefront. And I think we're in the earliest days of that storefront evolution of B2B. What do you think about storefronts and the evolution of storefronts? Will AWS Marketplace be the B2B marketplace to rule them all, or will storefronts be as significantly adopted as they are in consumer?
I always believe in the and answer in that one. I think you want both. If I look at what, say, Carahsoft has done with Carah Cloud for the government market, we had a great launch with them and their marketplace-powered storefront at the public sectors or the Washington, D.C. summit a few months ago. You look at what Ingram Micro is doing with Xvantage. You look what other partners are doing, like Vendor or others. We're starting to see this sort of federated storefront and what I like to call marketplace everywhere happening already. And for me, it's simple, is that, we want to meet customers where they are, and we want to, present marketplace to more customers and ultimately bring that joint customer business to partners at a higher scale. You said it yourself, all anyone cares about are leads. What's the best way to get leads? Well, to meet those customers where they're actually sort of looking, where they're going shopping. And if that is on another catalog, another storefront, let's put it there and let's preserve the benefits of AWS Marketplace wherever the customer experience is, and ultimately bring more of that business to our partners.
Awesome. Matt, can't thank you enough for joining us to have this conversation today. Looking forward to seeing you at Reinvent, and thanks for everything you all are doing to pioneer the evolution of how software is bought and sold.
Well, listen, Tackle's been a big part of this. I really appreciate the partnership. Thank you.
Thanks.